high alert. It says he expects terrorists to stage symbolic attacks. Our guest now is an expert on Iraq, both from a political and military perspective. Marisa Cochrane Sullivan is the Deputy Director of the Institute for the Study of War. She's also a former command historian for the multinational force in Iraq. Ma'am, thank you so much for being here. You study war, so in studying this one, I don't want to take anything away from the symbolism of what we have been seeing over the past 24 hours and the past couple of weeks. But is what we're seeing, is it more symbolic than it is substantive change in Iraq right now?
Well, good morning. Thanks so much for having me. There are several important changes that are taking place yesterday and today. The first is the change of mission of U.S. forces in Iraq, and that's something that President Obama talked about last night in his speech, and the Vice President today. And the end of the combat mission in Iraq, and a change to one of stability, of advising and assisting the Iraqis. The second important change that you've seen is the change of command of the U.S. military headquarters in Iraq. General Odierno, who's less well known than General Petraeus, but made an equally significant contribution in Iraq, who's been there on the ground for over almost 4.5 years, made a tremendous sacrifice. He is changing command. And relinquishing command to General Austin, who likewise has served in Iraq under General Odierno. So that's the second transition. The third transition is the U.S. lead will now go from a military lead to a civilian lead. So now the U.S. is still engaged in Iraq. There's still very important work to be done, but the lead on that work is the State Department, our U.S. civilians on the ground, and the military is now supporting that role.
And again, we talk, and you explain that, so much about, yes, so much of the symbolism that is important to note. And yes, there is a change technically in the mission, but we still have combat brigades there that are ready to go at a moment's notice. All this symbolism we have been seeing in this ceremony that we are watching, explain or describe how two different publics are taking this. The U.S. public might be doing it one day, happy to see it winding down, but what about the Iraqis? How are they viewing this moment of essentially the Americans getting technically out of the fight?
Sure. Well, in Iraq, this has actually been a transition that's been underway for months now. And the Iraqis, though today is important in its symbolism, the Iraqis have actually had the lead in security since the security agreement went into effect in early 2009. So this has been a transition that's been planned for months and years, that's been in the works. And so in terms of what you've seen on the ground, you're not going to see a dramatic change between what the Iraqis are doing and what U.S. forces are doing, because the Iraqis have been in the lead. U.S. forces have been providing important advice and assistance. But it's an important day for the United States in terms of what it signifies for the mission in Iraq.
How do you think this will affect the war in Afghanistan now? Not just a matter of so many troops are leaving Iraq, so now we have more resources to go towards Afghanistan, but in how this war has been wound down and how it's been handled, how will that affect us moving forward in Afghanistan?
Well, I think there's certainly going to be increased attention on Afghanistan, and the decision to add more resources has again came earlier this year, or late last year, when the president made his announcement. So you've started to see that shift in resources as U.S. forces have come out of Iraq. You're seeing more forces go into Afghanistan. So there has been a shift in the way efforts, but there's still important work to be done in Iraq, and I think that we can't lose sight of the opportunity that we have in Iraq, the partner that we've gained in the Iraqi state and in the Iraqi security forces. And Iraq has transformed from a pariah state to a very important U.S. partner, and so I think that there's certainly tremendous progress, but there's also a lot of opportunity and a lot of challenges ahead.
All right. Well, it's important to note this symbolic day, and the president did so last night as well. We will see what happens moving forward. Marisa Cochrane Sullivan, Deputy Director of the Institute for the Study of War. Ma'am, we appreciate your time. You enjoy the rest of your day.
Hey, thanks so much.
And with